Good evening. My name is Lawrence Berliner. I'm an attorney in the field of special education law. I'm here this evening with our co-host, Jane Faherty, who's the director of the Stamford Jewish Community Center's JumpStart program. We are continuing a series of webinars. Tonight's focus is on the Birth to Three program here in Connecticut. Jane and I and others are part of a community of concerned parents and professionals, and we are all still learning how to deal with this never-ending COVID-19 pandemic and all the related issues it's creating for us as professionals, parents, certainly our children, whether they're of education age or part over 3 or part of the Birth to 3 program. Jane and I have, it's hard to believe we've been doing this, I think this is our 3rd year now, moderating a series of webinars to address a myriad of issues in these unprecedented times to try to address the needs of your child's special education journey, but tonight, the Birth to 3 journey. We've gathered again tonight to address questions and concerns, parents' frustration, and share what we hope is some success to empower parents for the road ahead. If you go to our chat section, which I hope is working tonight, it wasn't the last time, you'll see all the contact information for myself, the Law Office of Lawrence Berliner, Jane Faherty, and the JumpStart program, and our 2 very special guests tonight who are part of the Birth to 3 community along with Jane. Jane runs the JumpStart program. She can introduce herself and discuss the JumpStart program. We have Karen Fetter, who's the director of the Therapeutic Services at Abilis, one of the several Birth to 3 providers located in Stamford, Greenwich, and Jennifer Miklautsch, if I've pronounced that correctly, who is also part of the Abilis program, who's an assistant director. So Jane, I'll turn it over to you, and then we can turn it over to our guests. I do have one last item. If you're asking questions, we would ask that you use the Q&A feature at the bottom of the computer screen and not use the chat. The reason being this webinar is being recorded, and anything in the chat is recorded, but the Q&A is not. The information provided during this webinar does not constitute specific legal advice from myself, Attorney Lawrence Berliner, and should not be relied upon for your child's circumstances. The webinar does not establish an attorney-client relationship with myself, Attorney Lawrence Berliner, nor does it establish a professional relationship with Jane Faherty and the Abilis program. By signing up, you've agreed to receive information about future webinars from either the Stamford JCC or the Law Office of Lawrence Berliner. Please note that the recording is by Zoom, a third-party provider, and it's not an agent or associated with the Law Office of Lawrence Berliner, the Stamford Jewish Community Center, or Abilis. So without further ado, Jane, it's good to see you again, and we'll get into tonight's topic.
Thank you, Lawrence.
It's Birth to 3.
It's nice to be back here this evening. I'm Jane Faherty. I'm the executive director of a program called JumpStart, currently located at the Stamford JCC, but hopefully also soon to have a classroom opening up in Norwalk in the new year. So JumpStart is a program for children with developmental delays, typically aged between 2 and 3. They sometimes join us a bit before their 2nd birthday, but they typically transition out in or around their 3rd birthday, as at that point, if they're eligible, they transition into a public school program, or they transition into another typical toddler or preschool classroom. The JumpStart program has 3 sessions, so children come for up to 6 hours a week. So they come either on a Monday, Wednesday morning, or a Tuesday, Thursday morning from 9 to 12, or they come 3 times a week in the afternoons from 1 until 3 on a Monday, Wednesday, and Thursday. the unique features of the JumpStart classroom are that the children do have that one-to-one support from a teaching assistant with a head teacher overseeing the program. But the idea is that children are given the opportunity to participate in fun, meaningful, playful, social opportunities as any child can in a toddler classroom. But we are lucky enough to individualize their experience with the support of a one-to-one teacher. And also we do have access to a lot of therapeutic elements and pieces of equipment. Even though we're not therapists, it is more of a therapeutic approach to their experience because it can be individualized. And we do, for example, have access to standards or different types of gait trainers or walkers or special adapted pieces of seating, as an example. So we very much collaborate and work very much in partnership with birth to three organizations throughout Fairfield County. Abilis is one organization that we've thoroughly enjoyed collaborating with over the last 16 years. Karen and her team and Jennifer and the team come into our classroom to help share their therapeutic expertise with my team and the teachers so that we are able to consistently support the children in the classroom environment as they are within the home or the community to make sure there's consistency across all domains. So we very much collaborate with Abilis and other birth to three agencies such as Theracare, Beacon, Benchmark, and also STAR, who are not technically birth to three, but they do provide services for children from birth through to age 8 in the local area as well. So it's a real pleasure to have both Karen and Jennifer here tonight. We've shared many children in common through the JumpStart program. We've also sat at the same table at PPT meetings when transitioning the children into the public school. And in that way, we really do collaborate both before those meetings, during the time of the child in that birth to three program whilst we're in JumpStart. And we all develop relationships and connections with the children, as does Karen and her team. And some of those relationships do extend beyond if not professionally, but on a personal basis, as it's always lovely to see how these children go on to develop, even once they are past age 3. It's nice to keep those relationships moving forward. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce you to Karen and Jennifer.
Hi, thank you, Jane. And Abilis does value that relationship that we have with you and with JumpStart, sitting at meetings together, sharing children together, and it's a collaboration that we do value very much. I'm Karen Fetter, and I've been the director at Abilis Birth to Three. I've been there for over 30 years now, working with many wonderful professionals in the program. I'm a speech pathologist by trade, and I am lucky enough to work with Jenny, and she will introduce herself as well.
Hi, I'm Jenny Miklautsch, and I'm the assistant director at Abilis, and I've been working in early intervention for a little more than 20 years now. And it really is a pleasure to watch these children as they grow and develop, and to work in collaboration with the community partners where we find the children out in the community.
Great. Thank you. And just to, Abilis is a not-for-profit agency serving the community for over 70 years now. It's a lifespan agency. We start at birth and we go to earth. So we have babies to senior citizens, and we've been doing early intervention in our department for a long time before Birth to Three even started. Before there was a Birth to Three program, we believed in early intervention because we know how important it is to get to children at their early years in their life and then in their development. So it's something we believe in and have been doing for a long time. And Abilis is one of 19 programs providing birth to three services in the state. We're one of 11 that is designated to provide autism testing and intensive services. And as Jane said, every town in the state of Connecticut gives parents choices. There are 2 to 3 programs. Some of the largest cities have 4 programs that offer parents a choice of programs. They can request Abilis in Stamford if they like, or there's a rotating basis. So the next program up will get the referral as parents call in. So we are just one of those programs. And Birth to Three was designed to support families who are worried about their child's development and seeing if they were meeting their milestones. It's a system of supports to help the needs of their children, parents meet the needs of their children who are experiencing delays in their development. Birth to Three has a single point of entry. Although I welcome any phone calls, and I do get many, I can't just, if you are concerned about your child, I will talk to you, Jenny will talk to you, but we can't just put you into the program. You need to go through 211 info line, or you can call, there's a 1-800 number, you can make a referral online, but it's through that 211 info line that the referral needs to come through. And then the next program will get the referral. So the next step that would happen would be we'd evaluate your child. And typically it's going to be at a time that's convenient for you and good for your child, a place where your child naturally is spending his time. So if it's at home or at the daycare center, that's where we'll go. Parents are large participants in the process. We know that they know their children the best. They're the experts on their child. So we encourage parent participation in the evaluation. It will be 2 people that come in, either a social worker and a special ed teacher, and the therapist of the situation that the parents are concerned about. So if it's motor, we'll have a physical therapist. If it's speech, we'll have a speech pathologist. If it's feeding, we'll have an occupational therapist. So depending on the needs, those will be the professionals that come into your home or daycare to look and speak with you about your child. You will get the results soon, that day. And if the child is not eligible, we certainly will talk to you about resources. We'll give you strategies because you've got those professionals in your home already. And you can re-refer your child at any point. After 1 month, you can make a re-referral. Or we will give you, we also will give you a tracking app to help you track their development and watch their milestones and see how they're doing. If they're eligible, you will be assigned a service coordinator who will guide you and your family in developing an individualized family service plan, which I'll let Jenny explain to you.
So can I just ask a couple of
Sure.
questions? Thank you, Karen.
Sure.
So if I'm a parent at home and I'm not in Birth to Three, if I dial 211, and then the person at the end of the phone, I just say, hi, I'm concerned about my child's development. They're not yet 3. And then that person on the end of the line will then guide me through the next steps and who I should talk to.
Right. They will ask you a series of questions. They will ask you what your concerns are. And then they will get the information over to the next program in line. If you've asked for a particular program, they will send that referral over to that particular program. If you have a sibling already in there, then they of course will recognize that and send it over to the same program. But yeah, that's exactly what it will
So
do.
when you're talking about an evaluation, what type of evaluations do you have? Do you do a separate speech evaluation? Do you do a separate occupational therapy evaluation? And if you do, what does that involve? Is that sensory profiling? Is it functional, independent living skills? Even though we know that they might be very young, but there's certain things. Are they holding a baby bottle? Are they, sleeping through the night? Are they, able to hold a rattle, for example, and then a physical therapy evaluation and a behavior evaluation. So are these separate and different evaluations that you complete? And does the child have to be eligible for all domains to qualify for Birth to Three, or can they just be eligible for one domain?
Okay, great questions. So depending on the needs of the child, if it's a motor, they're not walking, we will send a physical therapist in, and then we have a standardized testing for that. We also will look at all 5 areas of development. So we look at cognitive, we look at, regardless of the issue, one of us will be looking at something called the Battelle, which looks at all areas. So it's social, emotional, cognitive, fine motor, gross motor, and speech communication. And then we will zone in on the area of concern. So then if it's speech, we'll do a separate communications testing. So looking at their understanding, their expression of language. If it's feeding, we have a feeding scale. We have a feeding specialist who will come in and look and see what's going on. If it's sensory, we do have a sensory profile. If it's social emotional, we have something called the DECA, which is the Devereaux. Jenny, help me out. The Devereaux.
Early Childhood Assessment, I think.
Thank you. Which looks at attachment regulation and covers many of those areas as well. So depending on the needs of the child, we will do an overall look at the 5 areas, and then certainly the area of concern we will look at as well.
So when you're doing an evaluation, are you looking for a diagnosis, or you're just looking for developmental delay in a specific area?
Right. We don't diagnose. When we're looking for eligibility, which means there is a delay in one particular area. So they need to have 2 standard deviations, miss 2 standard deviations in one area, or they can do milder in 2 areas, like 1.5 standard deviations in 2 areas, like speech and personal social. It's totally not all areas. It's usually we are going to zone in on the area of concern. But it's interesting because we've been called in, let's say, for a speech concern, and we may not get them on speech, but we'll notice he's 18 months old and not walking, and we get him on motor. So that's why we look at all areas, regardless of what the area of concern is. We will look at all areas because you just don't know at that point.
And how do you handle, when I meet parents, quite often that they've just discovered that their child has a developmental delay that's been identified by a professional, which instinctively creates a level of anxiety for them. And they're looking for a promise or commitment that the therapy will resolve the issue in the short term, which obviously sometimes we can't always do. But how do you help reassure parents that by participating in an evaluation, by what parents quite often then perceive their child to have failed an evaluation, can you just explain to parents that it's not a question of failing, it's more about identification, and that how you use that information to then help their child?
Right. And it is, we're not diagnosing, but it's difficult. We're coming in and we're the first ones coming in to deal with a child or a family that's concerned about their child. And it is difficult for a family sometimes, but what we do is we involve them in the process. We involve them in the evaluation. We ask them a lot of questions, and they will kind of come to that conclusion sometimes themselves. We talk about different milestones, and we talk about the supports and the research behind, because Birth to 3 is very research based, and it's supported by a lot of research that the earlier you do go in, the better the outcomes and the journey, you know, with our support, and we are professionals. We've been doing this for a long time. The nice thing about Abilis is that most of our professionals have been with us a long time. So we've been doing this a long time, and we feel very confident. And our job is to help families develop that confidence and confidence in themselves. It's not to fix their child, it's to help them along this journey, to support them so they have the tools and strategies they need and feel good about that. So, you know, we develop, it's very important to develop that trust and respect before we bounce in with therapy. We want to really, and that's where the IFSP process comes in. That's the beginning discussion of our relationship, and we're going to go from there.
So Jenny, what is an ISFP? Can you just, because we hear these acronyms, like, you know, when you transition to public school, we have IEPs, everything is an acronym. What is an ISFP for the families listening?
So an IFSP is an individual family service plan. In Birth to 3, everything is very much family based. Children are still at home a lot of times, or even if they're in daycare, being at home is still a big part of their life. So once they've been found eligible for services, that next step is to write that plan together. And it is together as a team. Parents are very much a part of the team, and their input is not only wanted, but required. So we start by meeting together, we review the results of the evaluation, and then we start to build the plan. We look at who is in the child's life. We look at what their strengths are, what their challenges are, and then we look at what the parent priorities are. Everything is really driven by parent priorities. So we use that document to set a goal so that we have a goal to work on. And our job is really to work with the families. We ask parents about like their learning styles. Our job is to support families, to coach parents, to coach caregivers so that they have the skills that they need to be able to work with their child. That's what makes all the difference in the world. And the children who really have the best outcomes are the families that are so invested and involved in their child's program. They follow through on things. They're a real part of the team and collaborating with the professionals working with them. We do use a primary service provider model in Connecticut. So what that means is that we try to limit the number of people that we're sending in. We try to limit the number of sessions. We don't want to overwhelm families. And like I said, we do want to work with them. They need time to practice the strategies that we've decided to work on. And so that's usually, you know, whatever time is in between the services, that's what we're looking for during that time. There's a full team behind every plan. So if your child is only receiving maybe services from a developmental therapist, a teacher, and you say, well, but he's not talking and he needs speech. Well, there is a speech therapist who's part of that, and everybody is working on that same goal, that goal that was identified in the plan with the parents as their priority. It's a fluid plan as well. It's always reviewed at least every 6 months, but if things change, a goal is met, or we're not making progress on that goal, we want to shift things a little bit, we can meet before the 6 months are up, and we can make any changes to adjust the child's plan to meet the family's needs, especially if circumstances change, which sometimes they do. Maybe a child was at home and now he's starting daycare. And at home, there weren't very big problems, but maybe with starting daycare with that transition, it's been a little bit rougher. They need a little more support, and we can help with that as well. We do like to see children in their natural environment. So if they're at home with parents, or if they're out in the community, either in a childcare or at the park or at the mall, anywhere that children go with their families, that's where we want to be able to see them.
So Lawrence, what I think is interesting, because obviously Lawrence and I have experience with, you know, the birth to three, but then the transition into the public school. And I think that there's a lot of parallels in terms of, as a parent new to birth to three, taking some of the practices that maybe you could start to explore within your home environment with your birth providers. You can then use those skills maybe later on. Lawrence, I'm thinking of, we always explain to parents, keep a record of data and tracking your own personal experiences and sharing that with professionals and providers is a really important way for you to validate the progress that your child is making, or if they're plateauing. And I think that if families, with the relationship you have at birth to three, which is a bit more personal than you might have with a public school, if you can become comfortable collecting data, collecting anecdotes, examples, photos, videos of your child as they're progressing through birth to three, not overly so, but just enough, by the time you transition to the public school, that could set you up with the habits that you might need to then track their progress once from the public school. What's your thought on that, Lawrence?
Excellent point, Jane. You know, information needs to be recorded. You have to understand the IFSP document itself, what is being offered, what is being provided. And if there's a disagreement, as you heard, we can come back to an IFSP meeting to discuss the disagreement or misunderstanding. Since the natural environment often is the home and not, say, a school building, the parents are in the prime position to be the case manager. You're seeing your child every day in the natural environment, whatever that is. And if you have concerns with the 5 domains that are being looked at, maybe one is moving forward faster than the other 4. That has to be brought to the attention of the providers to make sure there's an appropriate standard for an IFSP, just like there's an appropriate standard for an IEP. And you want to make sure the IEP, the IFSP, either document, is capturing your child's needs. You want to make sure that the IFSP has an array of services that are designed to help not only train the parents, but help the child close whatever the identified gaps are. The BDI, the Battelle Development Inventory, is a very comprehensive evaluation. Understanding the results is critically important. Documenting areas of concern and areas of growth, very important. Because as Jane pointed out, this is a time-limited program. It's 36 months. It's not 36 months and then you get another day or a week or a year. It's 36 months. I don't know what the current statistics are, but at one time, the Birth to 3 program, the average age of referrals was 18 months.
Mhm.
And so that means you only have 18 months of services, as opposed to, it's a 36-month program, but on average, several years ago, was 18 months was the point families were tipping into the program. Well, you want to get as much as possible out of that 18 months or 36 months, whatever the amount of time, because it's going to come to an end. And all the data that you have, whether it's evaluations, anecdotal information, records, emails, personal diary, will eventually take you to what's called a PPT meeting, a pupil plan team meeting. That's with the local school district. And that process starts approximately 6 months before your child's 3rd birthday. And I've had many, many calls in my career where parents are absolutely thrilled with the Birth to 3 services. And then they run into the buzzsaw of a school district and says, your child doesn't need that, or we don't do it that way. So parents need to understand their rights. Not only there are what are called procedural rights in the Birth to 3 program, but parents also need to understand their procedural rights during this transition period from birth to 3 to special education.
Right.
Special education is from age 3 to 22. Birth to 3 obviously is from birth to age 3.
Right. And
you are and parents, you know, the Birth to 3 providers are trying to empower the parents, and as Jane said, get used to writing things down, because you may need that skill and that practice and that routine later on. Go ahead.
Great point. And, you know, we do provide a copy of rights to every family. We review them at every meeting. We value, because the rights are the parents' protection. And in Birth to 3, the parents have a lot of rights, and that we respect them and we encourage them to ask and really look into their rights. And we review it with them all the time. We value them as well. So we agree with you on that. I was going to say that what's very important in Birth to 3 is not so much what happens at our sessions, but what's happening between our sessions. What is going on? Because we want to teach the families, because those children that make the most progress are the ones where the families are following through. It's not our 1 hour a week, even our 2 or 3. It's what's happening between. What are we teaching families, and what are they following through on? And the first question when we go in is, hey, how did that go? What's going on? And we can either tweak it, or we can, you know, continue with it, or we can add to it depending on that. I just wanted to make one other point about assessments. We do the Patel, as I said at the beginning, and we do a number of standardized testing, but as we go along with the child, we do curriculum assessments as well. We use something called the HELP, and we use something called the Carolina. And so we go over that with them. We do it with the families. And so they have a good, you know, we have a baseline, and then we update it with the family so they can track the progress and see where it's going. Because you're right, both, it's very important that they see the progress, where we're going, and they can see next steps. They can see where they've been, what they need to accomplish, and where we're going towards, which is really important for families. So we agree with you completely on that, and we value that data. And we also collect that as well, especially when we have more intensive service. It's really important to collect that. We wanted to talk about a couple of things, since you mentioned 36 months, and it could be 36 months. There have been a couple of changes to the system. Something that was changed, what used to happen is children that had a birthday in May or June, they would have to transition if they were still eligible for service. They'd have to transition for the summer, and then come September, they would have to transition again. And so that was eliminated. So any child over May 1st, their birthday after May 1st, who would be eligible for services, has a choice now to either go into the Board of Education and receive their services from them, or to stay in Birth to 3 until the day of school in September, when school would start, which has been really nice for families, especially for children who it's difficult to make those transitions and who are comfortable with our program. And sometimes also July, some of the school districts only do provide services in July. with us, they would have it till September 2nd or 3rd, whenever school started. So that was a nice change. And we had a lot of families that chose to stay with us, as I'm sure other birth to 3 programs did. The other nice thing that was a change was we eliminated family fees, which really opened up the door for many, many more families. Because some of them were struggling with, even though it was on a sliding scale, in this day and time, any kind of financial, we didn't want to ever be a financial burden to families, but they had to choose, we didn't want them to choose feed my family or get speech therapy. So through lots of negotiating, a lot of work, legislative work, that was eliminated, which was wonderful. And one other thing during COVID, and I'm sure Jane, you did too, we all switched to remote. For some families, it was a blessing. We could stay in contact with them. For some children, it was a little more challenging and difficult. But what they did allow us to do was to keep remote services under certain circumstances. So if a child is sick or the therapist is sick and you didn't want to have to miss a session, we can provide those services. If there's a snowstorm and we can't get out to you, but you want the services, we can still provide that for you. If there's a specialist that we really wanted to see this child, but can't, it just didn't have the time or opportunity to go see this family, we can invite them in through a Zoom or, a remote platform, and they can do an assessment and meet the family, and families can get in more information. So it just adds to our toolbox of ways of connecting with families. Again, most of I think we just looked at in our program, I think we decided, what was it, Jenny, 92%, what was the percentage of
in-person visits?
Yeah.
I think we had about 94 or 95% in-person visits.
Right. So those children who might have not feeling well or have a compromised immune system, or brand new babies that just came home and didn't want us coming into the home, had the ability to also do remote. But, Birth to 3 is a home visiting program. That's our, what we're all about. So that's what we wanted to get back to as soon as possible, as do all the other programs. But we now have that ability. So those have been some of the changes that we were able to make for the good and for families, for the betterment of everyone. We also wanted to talk, you brought up transition. I think we wanted to talk about transition. We start talking about transition from the day that child enters our program. So we have a 1-day-old baby, 1-week-old baby, and we're talking about transition out of birth to 3. But it's important we do that because we want to prepare them for the next step, and it can never start too early. But I'll let Jenny talk a little bit more about transition.
Before you do that, I just want to do a program note, because several people joined us after the start of our webinar, that if you have questions, please put them in the Q&A section at the bottom of the computer screen. We welcome your questions if you have any. Thank you.
Okay. So that transition process, like Karen mentioned, we do start talking about it from day one to let parents know that yes, birth to 3 does end when their child turns 3, but the good news is there is more available after that, more support for them to find, and we're there to help them through every step of that transition process. So where we really start getting into it is about 6 to 9 months before a child turns 3. When we really talk to parents about, do you want that next step? Do you want to look at services through the local Board of Education to see if your child would qualify? And the first step is to give us permission to share information with the Board of Education. Everything in birth to 3 is confidential, and we can't share any information without parents' express written consent. So at that point, if they give us permission, then we will send their information, their child's information, to the local Board of Education. And about 90 days or a little before their 3rd birthday, we'll have a transition meeting with the Board of Education, a representative, where that's the parent's first opportunity to meet with someone from the local school district and to be able to share information about their child, share about their birth to 3 experiences, share about their child's strengths, and share about their concerns and what they're looking for beyond birth to 3.
So Jenny, just quickly, so at that point, it's typically the social worker from the school, correct, that will sit down and meet with the parents and go through a history?
Sometimes a history, and it depends on the school district as to whether it's a social worker or someone else. It doesn't have to be a social worker. In some instances it is, but in others it's not.
Okay.
Okay. From there, we have the PPT1, which is that planning and placement team meeting, where again, parents can share information with the school district. The school district will listen and they will decide what evaluations they would like to do to determine whether or not this child is going to meet the criteria to be eligible for services through the Board of Education.
So I just would, at that point, that meeting for parents is actually really important, because the evaluations that are going to be completed upon your child by the school district will inform the district with that information about your child's eligibility, not only for a special education program, but also potentially for any related services that they might need in order to have a free, appropriate public education. So once you transition into the public school, you will not be charged for any related services your child receives within the district. So you will not be charged a fee for any physical therapy, occupational therapy, speech therapy, special education, behavior supports, or any other related services in the district. It is free compared to some of your experiences, not necessarily with birth to three, but private practitioners you might have used along the way. So that's an important piece to mention. So when you are at that PPT1, it is very important to make sure that you request and have your child evaluated for the right domains that you are concerned about, and not to skip over an evaluation that could provide the team with the vital information that could be used to produce the correct IEP and related services to support their individual needs. Lawrence, do you have any other suggestions in terms of being careful about making sure that all the evaluations are completed at that point?
This is where the parents' experience and the data that they're collecting, as well as any evaluations that were completed by the birth to three providers, becomes important, because you're not writing on a clean slate. When you go to a PPT meeting, you're writing on up to a 36-month developmental history from the birth to three program. And school districts often will say the child doesn't qualify. Well, how do we know that? It's through evaluations. And if parents know in their heart of hearts, and if they have a notebook or an electronic or written notebook with all the data in it, they can say, look, this is where my child is strong, this is where my child is weak with the skills, and there are developmental delays, and we would like you to evaluate all areas of the actual or suspected disabilities. And that is done with with your parents' consent. And it's a comprehensive evaluation of all areas. As the birth to three providers do 5 domains, we're not limited to 5. We look at cognitive and academic achievement, speech and language, PT, OT, social and emotional, and there are many other areas that are part of the actual or suspected disability. And that's why, as you're getting ready to exit the birth to three program and enter birth to three, knowing your rights, knowing your child especially, is critically important, because for the next approximately 18, 19 years of eligibility, or sooner, depending on whether they graduate after 4 years of high school or they're eligible through age 22, you and the school district need to develop a collaborative, constructive, and working relationship to establish eligibility, to determine what is appropriate progress, what kind of services are necessary, what kind of related services, which would be like speech, OT, PT, counseling. Those are 4 out of many that will support the child in public school. And that's often where I get involved. There's a flashpoint of the transition to birth to three, where parents they like the IFSP, they're getting all the support they need, all the services the child needs as well. And then they go to a PPT meeting and, we don't know the child, so we want to get to know the child, and then we'll determine whether or not the child is eligible. Well, that is not the way the law works. That's the way it works in the real world, but the law requires a referral, an evaluation, if eligible, an IEP. If not eligible, then parents can ask for outside evaluations, look at their procedural safeguards for special ed, which will differ from the procedural safeguards for the birth to 3 program.
I'd also like to caution parents too, and this is not a reflection of Abilis, but of birth to 3. Unfortunately, this does happen. You might have a child who does have significant needs, and the birth to 3 agency, not Abilis, but birth to 3 agencies aren't always able or willing to provide all the therapeutic support your child might need. I've had children in the past that have needed OT support, but because of the birth to 3 providers and the nature of the organization, they have not received OT, for example, or even speech support. They've had a teacher provide some of these therapeutics and only had consultation from the specialists. On those occasions, sometimes the school districts say, oh, well, your child didn't receive speech or OT or PT or behavior supports from birth to 3, therefore, we don't deem it necessary to complete those evaluations either. So I would just make it very clear to a district when you are transitioning from birth to 3, that whilst you might have enjoyed and valued some of the help and support you had from them, that is not the be all and end all, and that it doesn't necessarily mean that if you've only received speech once a week from your birth to 3 team, that's all the child is going to need when they transition into the public school. Or if you've been concerned about your child's sensory needs or their ability to have independent functional skills and they haven't received OT, that doesn't mean that they shouldn't have an OT evaluation when transitioning and looking for transition to public school. So I just want parents not to automatically assume that because you've only had a limited number of birth to 3 clinicians or providers, that's all you should request for in terms of evaluation when you transition into the public school. And quite often, when it comes to determining eligibility or the level of related services, you might be in a meeting and the administrator might say, but you only used to receive speech once a week or OT once a week, therefore we're only going to give you the equivalent now. That should not be the case, because a child might have also been receiving private speech, private outlets, or maybe because of the system, they weren't able to have sufficient, because of lack of staffing or resources within an agency, they weren't able to have the full complement of related services that one would have hoped for them to have. It doesn't mean we need to continue to have a deficit in their related services transitioning over. So just be very mindful that just because you've had something in birth to 3, therefore you should continue to have the same level of provision when transitioning into public school. There are lots of instances where actually you can have access to more resources and you might need access to more resources. So just be careful at those PPTs. Don't be caught in a scenario where you say, oh yes, only needed, we only had. That doesn't mean that's always going to be the case when you transition into the next school environment. Karen or Jenny or Lawrence, if you have anything to add with regard to that.
Right. Well, it's interesting because, Jane, as kids grow and develop, their needs do change. And what they come in as one point, maybe they come in with feeding, but then within 6 months, feeding is better, but then they don't develop speech. So one of the things we do in birth to 3 is we teach parents to be aware of the needs of their child. So when they go to this PPT meeting, they are able to identify what their child's needs are through what we've been working on with them, through what, and sometimes that it does change, not sometimes, it always does change as the child grows and develops, their needs change too. And we want the family to be aware of that. So when they come to that meeting, they can advocate for themselves and they can voice what the issues are, what they're concerned about, and what their child's needs are at that particular moment, where it may not have been something then, but that's something we do. And I agree with you. Parents do need to know that so they can advocate for their child's needs, which may change, but that's part of our job too. I think, Jenny, you want to go on with transition a little bit, because that's one of the things we prepare them for, are these meetings.
Right. We do spend a lot of time talking to parents, talking to families about what to expect at these meetings, what their priorities are for their child, and giving them ways to ask for that, practicing before we go in, so that they will be able to advocate for their child. And these are lessons that they will be able to take with them all the way up, as long as their child needs special education. So it's just the first place where we start that. So during PPT-1, those evaluations are decided on and parents give permission for those evaluations. The school district then completes those evaluations and comes back to meet again for PPT-2, typically in roughly a month. The timeline can change a little bit, but that's about the amount of time. The reports should be sent to parents in advance of PPT-2. One of the things that we do tell parents is, please, if you don't see them, please request the draft copies of those reports so that they have a chance to read over them and go over them before they're sitting in a meeting. There's nothing worse than sitting in that second PPT, trying to absorb everything that's in those reports and trying to make sure that it is an accurate picture of your child. And then also trying to then either develop a plan or deal with the fact that maybe they weren't eligible and you hoped they were, or whatever the results were.
That's a great point, Jennifer. I'm just going to stop you there because Lawrence, as we both know, there are some technical timelines by which the district actually have to legally provide parents with information, and there's a technical timeline by which they have to complete evaluations as well, and not just. So Lawrence, if you want to go into more detail about it, because this is important for the parents to know their rights and entitlements, because just because a PPT is scheduled and you're not prepared, you don't have the information, doesn't mean you have to go through with it. So Lawrence, if you'd like to expand upon that for them.
Well, there's 2 points I want to make, and one is the letter I in an IFSP and the letter I in an IEP. Both of them stand for individual. See, the IFSP has to be based upon the child's unique needs. The IEP has to be based upon the child's unique needs. Typically, I'm dealing with what's called categorical decision-making by school districts. You're not eligible. There's no evaluation to prove that the child or establish the child is not eligible. School districts have to do the evaluation to determine eligibility or determine ineligibility. As far as the evaluation timelines, you should get a PPT meeting as quickly as possible. And it's advisable to do this in writing so you have a record. You contact the director of special education. If it's not already happening during this transition period from birth to 3 to special ed, you contact the director of special education in your local district, ask for a referral to special education in writing so you have a timeline. And what's supposed to happen, the referral, I don't know, I think it's supposed to be a PPT meeting within a matter, I think it's 10 days or 14 days. But I am aware there is a 45 school day timeline from the date you sign a consent form for a school district evaluation to the point in time that evaluation is completed. And we have a PPT meeting by that 45th school day to review the evaluations. Now, 45 days in the life of a teenager may not amount to much, but 45 days in the life of a 3-year-old is quite measurable. And that's why you don't want to delay, you don't want to assume, you need to be proactive. And if you don't understand what's going on, don't be shy. Some school districts have ombudsman people. I think Norwalk, for example, has that. Some have school-based advocates. Don't be shy. Seek out the resources that are out there in your community, and in some cases statewide, like the Connecticut Parent Advocacy Center is a resource. There are many other resources out there. Jane and I have information on our respective websites, and we have a host of pre-recorded webinars available, I think, on YouTube that cover some of these topics. Because Jane and I have been doing this, this is our 3rd year now, so we have a lot of recordings out there on various topics. School psychologists, behavior plans, evaluations, you name it. I'm sure we've done it. The one thing we haven't done is birth to 3, so this is why we're doing it tonight. So it's very important that you be proactive. Don't assume, don't be passive. These are your rights. You're not going to offend anybody by asking. You're not going to offend anybody by sending an email. What you are doing is advocating for your child's best interests, and that's what parents do. When it comes to special education, when it comes to birth to 3, on top of that, you have rights. Those are the procedural rights. Those are the procedural safeguards. I think Karen showed you the lavender copy for the birth to 3. There's I think it's blue now, blue and orange copy for the procedural safeguards for special education. So that's what I wanted to add to what the 3 of you were pointing to. Letter I, individualized, not categorical decisions, and knowing your rights, and don't be shy.
Yeah, and just to say the other reason why I think the evaluation reports have to come in, I can't remember if it's 3 days before the PPT2.
For an initial evaluation,
5.
the answer is yes. For subsequent PPT meetings, I don't know if there was a policy for the virtual PPT meetings that the records had to be provided to the parents 3 days prior to the meeting to ensure their meaningful participation. I don't know that if that policy was carried forward for the 2022-23 school year. Regardless, I always ask for a copy of the reports or any other documents that are going to be looked at or relied upon during the meeting, because it's very difficult to be in a physical or virtual room with, say, 10 or 12 people, where they all know that what you're talking about, they have documents, they understand the lingo, the acronyms, and you're learning for the first time about an evaluation report. So this helps you prepare for the IFSP meetings. This helps you prepare for the PPT meetings to have this information ahead of time. So if you have any questions, speak to the author of the report. If you have any questions for the PPT or the IFSP meeting, write them down and you can ask those questions. Because sometimes these meetings can be very intimidating for parents, especially when they're...
The other really important reason why you want access to those reports at least 3, if not 5 days before, I can't remember if it's 3 or 5, before your legal right to have access to it before the PPT2 meeting, is because you want to not only understand that document, but you might challenge it too. You have been potentially, let's say it's a speech evaluation from the district, and they are saying that your child does or doesn't have certain skills. Well, if you've been working with maybe a birth to 3 speech pathologist for X period of time, it's important for them to also have a look at that evaluation, because they might have additional information that they can add to that report. They might disagree with elements of that report, or maybe they will concur with some of the conclusions of that report. But it's very important to share that information with your birth to 3 team and also any private practitioners, because they can all be invited to PPT2 with you to join you at the table. Private practitioners and birth to 3. Now, Karen and Jenny can tell you what their limits are in terms of what they're allowed to say at PPT, but someone such as myself or a private practitioner has a lot more free rein to challenge or add additional information that can help bolster your child's IEP goals and objectives, or even indeed the related services that potentially they could be offered when they transition into the district. But Karen and Jenny are more restricted in terms of what they can do in terms of advocacy for you. Someone such as myself, I am a private advocate. I do have my own business doing that, have a lot more free rein. So I don't know if Jenny or Karen, if you could explain why, as an agency, you are somewhat limited in terms of what you can say at the meeting, but how important it is for you and your team to have access to those reports before the PPT2.
It is really important to have access to those reports. It's really important that parents understand what they say, that it is an accurate picture of their child and their child's skills and abilities. Because as you said, it drives the eligibility. It drives whether or not they're going to get services, and if so, what services they might receive. And there's a number of different reports. For every evaluation they do, there's another report. So it's not just one eligibility evaluation, it's potentially 2 or 3 or more to be able to look at and understand. And if parents can share those with us, we can take some of our birth to 3 session time to answer any questions they might have about it, to talk to them about, do we agree with what it says? Is it an accurate picture of your child? And if not, what's missing? We can share that information, but it's better if parents can share that information at the PPT, or even better yet, sometimes in writing beforehand, back to, as Lauren said, the author of that report, to find out why that discrepancy is there before we go into an eligibility meeting. So, and that's what's happening at PPT too. It's that eligibility piece. It's making sure that it's there. Our job really is to coach parents, teach them to advocate for their children. We can share information about their child's abilities, the things that we're working on in their sessions. But what we don't do is advocate for services. We can't advocate for them. So we can't say, well, we recommend that they get, a classroom 5 days a week. That's really something that a parent can ask for if they feel strongly about it, but it's not our place to make that recommendation.
And if a parent doesn't feel comfortable or confident enough to do it, that's where you can reach out to someone such as myself as an advocate to help have that conversation that you are, and you're maybe less experienced in having, or that a birth to three agency are not able to have. It's not that they would necessarily agree or disagree with the district. They're just not in a situation where they can argue that point with the district. They can just provide information about what their experiences with working, collaborating with that family and child has been up until that date. They can't then take it further and say they need more than just 2 times 30 speech a week. Someone such as myself or Lawrence are more than able and willing to do that based upon the data that we have access to from yourself as a parent, which is why I say it's important to make those anecdotal notes, keep a track of the data that you receive from your agent, the birth to three providers. They give you the notes at every session to tell you what they've worked on, the progress they've seen, the strategies that they recommend. Keep a track of that data, because at some point it might be useful information to have. And even once your child has transitioned into a district, when you're looking back at a child's progress, you don't just look back at a 1 or 2 or 3 month period. In some instances, Lawrence and I might have to review an extended period of time, expanding more than 12 months. So if your child is struggling, for example, in kindergarten or first grade, you might want to track back the history to kind of pinpoint where their progress stopped or plateaued at what point, having made gains at a certain age. So it is important to keep a track of data and to get support from those if your existing team aren't able. It's not that they don't want to, it's just that's not their domain or realm, because they are a state agency. So Karen and Jenny would have certain limitations as to what they can technically say or not say at these meetings.
Can I make another point there too, Jane? When you talk about collecting data, also really important to keep your IFSPs, keep the copies of those developmental evaluations and everything that you got from birth to three. It's a lot easier if you have it and you don't have to try to go back later and we have to dig through old files to find things, which of course we can and will do. We do retain the files for 6 years. But if parents get in that habit of building a folder, building a file of all of their children's important papers, then they're gonna have it at the ready. They're gonna have it as soon as they need it, and they won't have any of that lag time trying to find those files.
I was at Staples the other night, $4.99 for a notebook.
There you go.
Keep it all in one place if you want to use a three-wing
Right.
binder.
We tell them that all the time, totally, and we agree. And yeah, and just to summarize, birth to three is a voluntary program, so children can exit at any time they want if the families feel they've met their milestones or they've had enough or they want out, they can. But if they stay with us, we will be there through all those meetings. Parents can invite anyone they want to these meetings, and they do. And certainly, Jane has been to many of our meetings with us, and we will support parents and teach them. But it's a very difficult and it's a very stressful time. But if they stay with us and they're with us, we will be there with them. And again, reading those reports, as Jenny said, supporting them, giving them some, our opinions on what, and helping them develop their own opinions and supporting them through these meetings.
Well, I think we've come to an allotted time. We gave this about an hour. I don't see any questions in the Q&A, so this may be a logical point to wrap up. I want to thank Jenny and Karen for participating with us this evening, and of course, Jane, our co-host. Jane and I will continue our Zoom webinars throughout the 22-23 school year. We periodically have conversations with experts in the field of special education and related, like birth to three. We have had and will have special education roundtable discussions, and we will continue to keep a watchful eye on developments in the field of special education as the year progresses. So I want to thank Jane, Karen, and Jennifer for your collaboration and your very informative presentation this evening. If you're enjoying these webinars, please do not hesitate to register for the next one. And we anticipate our next one will be on November 17th. And we're going to be discussing dyslexia, a reading learning disability for those who may not be familiar with the term, taking ownership of your child's learning challenges. And we will have our special guest is Suzanne Bailey Rice, who's the founder of Shoreline Learning LLC, who is a specialist in the field of Orton Gillingham and special education, literacy, academics, and just a genuine, like tonight's presenter, is just a font of knowledge. We want to share that knowledge with those that register for our webinar. Lastly, I want to thank my daughter, her name is Rachel, and those who've registered or have gotten emails from her, because there's a lot of behind the scenes efforts to put these webinars on, and she has taken on that responsibility and the load. As we're moving forward, we welcome your questions if they're germane to the topic at hand. If you signed up for the webinar, you'll get future emails from us solely about future webinars. There will be a Zoom recording, I think it's on YouTube, that will be sent to you following tonight's webinar. So I want to thank our special guests. And Jane, any concluding remarks? And then we'll have Jenny and Karen provide their concluding remarks.
Yeah, I'd like to thank Jenny and Karen for coming tonight and for sharing their expertise and knowledge in the birth to three realm and with Abilis, and just thank them for the partnership that we have created between JumpStart and their organization and their team of clinicians and providers. It's a really lovely collaboration that we have. And again, in supporting the families through the transition together in the public school. We really do work hand in hand when it comes to that time, which can be challenging and stressful for the child as well as for the parents. And just to say that if you check out our JumpStar's Facebook page or Instagram, we do have some free, everything is free, social events, which are a fun way to meet other parents in the local community to connect and engage. I think we have, some wine tasting with paint and sips. We've done axe throwing. We've done sunset cruises, kayaking. We've done all sorts of lovely fun things that don't cost you anything. And if you're starting out on this journey, you're not alone. There's certainly lots of other people that are possibly going through the same thing as you or a bit further down the track. So I do encourage you to look at our JumpStar's Facebook page or Instagram for social connection and engagement, and look forward to meeting you at some of those events. And just want to thank Karen and Jennifer for the work that you do for this community. It is tremendous. And Karen, I've worked with you for many years. I know that you're vested in this in so many other ways too. So it's a pleasure to have you both here tonight. Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much. And thank you for the invitation and the chance to share our knowledge about birth to three and let parents know about it. Any support we can give to any family that's struggling or concerned about their child, we're here for them. And we're a phone call away, and we're happy to speak with families and put them at rest or give them the support that they need. And we cherish the relationship we have with you, Jane, too. And we're just happy to be part of this community and to be able to support it in the way we do. So thank you. And so nice to meet you, Lawrence. It was great.
Pleasure is all
wealth of information, both of you. I learned something today.
I learned a lot. I learned a lot. I don't have many clients contacting me about birth to 3, but I now have some resources if they do, because most of the time, as I said, the flashpoint is that transition, and that's where I can be, mindful of, their rights, their needs, knowing that they've been well served by all 3 of you as providers.
Thank you.
Jenny, anything, final comments?
Thank you so much for this opportunity. I think Karen really summed it up. We enjoyed, sharing information on birth to 3, and just to really let parents know, no question or worry is too small. If you have any kind of concern at all, please don't hesitate to call birth to 3. That's what we're here for. We love nothing more than coming out to see you and your children and to answer any questions you have. And like Karen said, either put your mind at ease or give you the supports that you need.
Well said. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you all
Thank you.
who participated, and we say good night.
Good night. Thank you.